Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Visionary Museum Operations Strategies for a Sustainable Future webinar. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We are excited to have leaders, operators, and change makers from across the museum community with us today. My name is David Hiltner, and I'll be your moderator today. I am part of the team at Vivart, an all-in-one CRM platform built specifically for museums and cultural institutions. Vivart helps museums bring together fundraising, ticketing, memberships, financing, retail, and reporting into one single source of truth so that teams can move beyond silos and operate with clarity, agility, and confidence. Our work focuses on helping museums strengthen their operational foundation so that they can spend less time managing their systems and more time advancing their mission. That said, today's session is not about software features. It is about how museums can think differently about operations. We will explore how leadership teams can move from reactive, fragmented workflows towards a more informed, cohesive, and resilient operational model. I am thrilled to be joined today by our guest, Neal Stimler, president of Stimler Advantage. Neal brings more than 2 decades of experience advising museums and cultural organizations on enterprise systems, digital transformation, and operational strategy. He has worked closely with boards, executives, and cross-functional teams to help institutions modernize how they manage people, processes, and technology while staying aligned with their mission. Neal, we are grateful to have you with us today. But before I turn things over for you to introduce yourself in your own words, I have a few housekeeping notes before we begin. Just for everybody, this session is recorded and the recording will be shared with all registrants after the webinar. Please keep your microphone muted during the presentation to avoid any background noise. We encourage questions throughout the session, but we will answer them at the end of the session. Please use the Q&A or chat. We intend this to be a practical and candid conversation, not a sales presentation. Please be respectful of differing perspectives and experiences as institutions are at different stages of their operational journey. With that, Neal, thank you again for joining us today, and I'll hand it over for for us to get started.
Great. Well, David, thank you so much. And thank you to the Vivart team and the Vivart community for welcoming me to join you today. And I'm really excited to share and start off our year of 2026 with some aspirational, exciting, hopeful, visionary museum operations. We could all use a little boost of goodness and positivity to get things going. So I hope that we're all in that frame of mind today. Just a little bit more about myself for those of you that are joining today. So as David mentioned, I do have 20 years plus experience in the field. I started working at museums when I was in high school. I've worked in historic homes. I've worked in small regional museums. I've worked for some of the largest institutions in the world, like the Met in New York City. And as a consultant, I've worked with clients across Australasia, the United States, Canada, and Europe. So I've worked with lots of different organizations in different sizes. I've dealt with everything from biological collections and zoos and aquaria to rocket ships. So I've pretty much seen it all. So your institution is probably represented here in some way today, whether you're an archive, a special collection, or a library. And I also come from, an institutional structure and context that many of you have where we've been faced with a lot of hard challenges. In my times in museums, I've experienced superstorms, economic recessions and collapses, political, social change, public health and safety crises. We've all been through a lot over the last few years, last few decades. And so we need to keep thinking forward about our approaches. And this is hopefully an approach to do that today. So David, can we go to the next slide?
Yep.
Great, thank you. So what we're going to cover today on a very high level, just to give you some broad strokes and think about big picture thinking, is we're going to define and build a visionary museum operations strategy. We're going to talk about strengthening your enterprise resource planning. We're going to discuss practical systems tips for procuring software with teams. We're going to explore effective and sustainable funding approaches. And we're going to help you get started with your own roadmap of how you can take action on these steps. Next slide, please, David. Thank you. Why does this matter? As David's outlined here, museums thrive when operations support the mission, not slow it down. So, if we think about ops and operations, we're thinking about something that's dynamic, something that's changing, something that's moving constantly, that we're guiding and we're pushing forward. But it's not something that's broken down into departmental silos and fragmented workflows. So what that means is the marketing department does this, and the visitor experience team does that, and they're using two different softwares, and none of that works with the retail team, right? And we think we're trying to have empathy for our visitors and our customers and our users, right? Because they're going to buy a ticket. They're going to probably buy something in the shop, and they may also attend an educational program or an event. So we're trying to think about how to bring all that together for them. We're going to try to help you move past reactive decision making driven by incomplete data. So maybe you have a current piece of software or a current workflow in place, even could be something as simple as spreadsheets, where yes, you have a piece of the puzzle, you have some of your sales data, you have some of your visitor numbers, but if all of that data were presented in a more holistic way for your team, your colleagues, and collaboration across an organization, how could we be more proactive being informed by that? And then if we think about leadership time consumed by operational friction, how many of you are either managers yourself or manage teams or also have relationships with board members or executives where you're often asked to produce information in very concise, quick, packaged formats? Thinking about visionary museum operations can help you do that. And we really want to help you think about a focused, clear, and long-term sustainable solution. And that long-term is not a fix in a moment in time. It's something that's going to constantly grow and change, but the aspects of what you're doing will help set you up for longer-term success. Super. All right. So what are visionary museum operations? How are we going to define this? Put some parameters around it. So we'll start with number one. Always a good place to start. Decisions are relying on data-informed, mission-aligned insights. So data-informed means that we're human beings. We have expertise in our institutions and our operations and our roles. So we're going to look at data, but we're not going to let data drive us. We're going to let it inform us, right? We know how our institutions work, but for that to work best, we need to capture that data. So let's think about some basic visitor experience as an example here. So if you wanted to get some visitor surveys in the past, and maybe some institutions do this still, you might have a paper form or an anecdotal question that gets asked when someone's at the ticket counter. We can do much better when we have that information recorded digitally and integrated into holistic systems so that it's easier to track and process that information to give those data-informed insights. So it's a combination of our own critical judgment as museum practitioners, our expertise, along with collecting the data. But the collecting the data and managing it as efficiently and effectively as possible is a really important step to help our missions. Number two is we're agile. We're evolving through constant rapid adjustments. Now, that isn't always pleasant or easy for us, right, in our day-to-day lives, but also as working professionals. But we're faced by so many threats and challenges. Having a mindset and an approach to our work that understands that change is the constant and that shifts and direction are going to happen all the time, and being ready to deal with that will help us be more prepared. Number three, we're going to be entrepreneurial. We're going to think outside of the box. We're going to be proactive and creative and finding partnerships for financial stability. And that means with solution providers, in the case of a software company. It could also mean other types of partners. So you might have partners that help you produce exhibitions. You might have partners that help you produce events. You might have collaborations in your retail environment where you're partnering with another brand that you think will speak well to your audience and supports your mission. So having that entrepreneurial mindset is really important. We're also going to be cohesive. So we're going to work as the one team driven by the mission. And I know this can be hard and challenging for folks sometimes when you're so used to working in your own departmental structures and with your own teams. It can sometimes be harder to remember that you're part of a larger organization, especially if you're siloed in your physical office space or in your computer at home if you're working remotely. But remember that you're all there on the same team, right? If you're a sports fan, maybe it's a sports team you like. If the team doesn't play together, it's much harder to win. So we're just keeping that one team mindset is really important. And then being proactive. So as leaders of our institutions, wherever we are in the organizational hierarchy, we're going to try to anticipate change and take decisive action. So rather than letting things happen to us, we're going to take positions to prevent risk from happening, mitigate that risk, but
Yeah.
also to take bold opportunities to look to the future. David?
Yeah, no, this is all great, fantastic. And then where do you see like executive teams where they most often underestimate the complexity of an operational change?
The biggest challenge, I think, is thinking that because something might be complex, that it's an insurmountable obstacle, or that if I wade into the complexity, I will never get out of it. I will be stuck in that complexity, mired in it, and I won't be able to transition to the other side. The best
Amazing.
thing I think to do is to just acknowledge that work in institutions like museums, some of which are hundreds of years old, that have
Okay.
lots of component parts and
Right.
facilities and institutional history. That is a complex work. It's not simple work. So we need to respect the complexity, but also not be afraid to address it.
Amazing. Okay. Gonna go to the next slide here. Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So now we're going to talk about enterprise resource planning. And for those of you that like acronyms or little handy turns of phrase, you're going to remember ERP, enterprise resource planning. And this is a really important category of software that many different types of organizations use, both in the corporate and the nonprofit sector. But we're going to help you think about that as a strategy here as well. So number one, mindset. We want to think about software and our resource planning as a unified approach with shared data stewardship. So let's talk about data for a second. We were mentioning before some examples of visitor experience, the retail shop, and maybe membership in this case is something different, right? So each one of those departments probably has their own data set, and they are the keepers of that data. And that's great. But it's much more important for us to think about how does that data work holistically together when we have as complete a picture as possible about how people are working with our institution. So we want that unified mindset and approach to thinking about our data as a shared stewarded resource. Going to Unity. So what happens often organically in organizations is maybe one department buys a piece of software or one piece of software is acquired at this stage of life and another one happens later. So it can be organic that things happen sort of in an ad hoc way. But usually there's a critical point where those things start to break down, where the disconnection and the miscommunication between those systems becomes more of a burden than a help. And so thinking about a software platform that has different components that can serve us well, that's unified and give us that single source of truth, as David mentioned earlier, is really very helpful. And what you often find is that the manual work, especially of having to import, export spreadsheets across various systems or create custom reports for executives is super time consuming and painful and doesn't often utilize the best talents and skills of the people in those roles who could be doing. One of the things I would often like to say to my clients is I try to help smart people from stopping to do stupid things because they have more capability and skill that
Right.
they need to be applied elsewhere. So let's make it easier on all of us and try to organize the data better. For performance, we want to talk about structured data to resolve pain points. So that means working with your internal teams, solution provider systems experts or consultants to really make sure that the system that you're using is optimized in such a way that you have things like pre-identified tags. You build taxonomies and fields so that you can automate and structure this information as easily as possible so that you don't have to do it on the fly every time. And also so you can alleviate yourself the pain of when you do have miscommunication internally, is something called an event or is it called a program, right? Being consistent in our nomenclature and our terminology so that we have a shared understanding of that structured data we can apply across various workflows. Oversight. I'm a huge believer in aligning leadership and working with IT, who has a huge job, whether that's in the managed service capacity, where your IT may be outsourced or in-house, to make sure that your technology environments are aligned with the leadership goals and strategic priorities. This is especially important if we think about cybersecurity, if we think about sustaining these applications from bugs, from user downtime, making sure that IT is guiding this process and informed and aligned is so important today in the system environment. That speaks to resilience, our next point, making sure that we have systems that are protected from threat and also that aren't going to fail us. For example, if we have a weather scenario, I'm currently based in upstate New York. I have many feet of snow outside of my house, and institutions across the last few days in the United States have been closed due to weather. So, or if we had an unfortunate weather phenomenon like a hurricane or something else, where if you had it only on an on-premise environment, meaning the technology, the servers on your building, if you lost that for some reason, that you wouldn't lose all your data, right? That would be tragic. It would really set you back. So you want to make sure that you've got backups and cloud infrastructure that you can deploy those things and get access to them anywhere. And we want to talk about mitigation, right? So if we don't want to have what's called shadow IT, we don't want to have pockets of data or keys governing information in places that it shouldn't be or in places that aren't protected and stored and managed to mitigate risk. We don't want to have sensitive data about donors and patrons in places it shouldn't be. We want to have all eyes on it so that it's a secure, supported system that's overseen by the people that need to oversee it. David?
Amazing. Yeah. And so like in your experience, Neil, like what typically breaks down when museums try to operate with multiple disconnected systems?
So one of the challenges there is legacy technical debt. So we
Okay.
oftentimes start on different journeys where we procure one system for this need and another for that need. But as our environments grow more mature, if we don't have the shared technology stack where through an application programming interface, for example, an API, where data can be crosswalked to one another, or we have one single system that can replace those separate systems, streamline the workflow, those are where things start to break down. The point where you know where things aren't working anymore is
Yeah.
when you identify you're losing revenue or you're spending
Okay.
more time fixing problems than doing your work. So those are things I would keep in mind.
Amazing. Thank you.
Okay, so let's talk about the procurement process. And it will vary, of course, by institution, by your size, by your budgeting processes, but there are some common themes I think we can help here and look at of how to go about doing this. So my recommendation that a systems procurement for an ERP system, enterprise resource planning, should really be a top-down initiative from executives and boards. And the reason for that is sometimes if these things come from bottom up, although that advocacy can be good, if there's not complete and total buy-in from the executive leadership and the board to support this, both with their influence and their financial contributions or their leadership efforts, it may die before you can even get it off the ground. So it's better to start, I think, with that top level of leadership that really says, from the outset, what, we believe in this. We're committed to this. We're going to see it through. So start there. Two, I recommend building a project team of collaborators in your organization. It could be in those different departments that are, a coalition of the willing that want to do this work, that believe in the importance of it, that are going to commit to working together and with you to make it successful. If you just try to start it by yourself or as one department, you may not have the support across the organization that you need. So think about building a team together.
Important. Yep.
Engagement. We want to gather feedback from staff, people working on the ground, but also the visitors. We shouldn't be buying a system to solve an abstract problem. We should be buying it based off market research and customer data. So if our customers are telling us, our visitors, our retail clients, our school camp purchasers, that they can't get a ticket or that the system crashed
Yeah.
or no one answered their email, right? These are real world examples and problems that you can build a use case against and a system profile against to solve those problems. So we shouldn't just be solving from the abstract. We should solve from actual data and also from staff experience. When we think about a selection process, you can use different tools that could help you on the way. I'll throw a few more acronyms out there for you. One is an RFI, a request for information. So that means you would put out information requesting that solution providers give you information about their product, tell you what they're doing, maybe give you a demo, but you're not committing to a full purchase process. Another is what's called an RFP, request for proposals, where you are looking for multiple solution providers to give you information about their product, demonstrate it to you, talk about the implementation process, and your goal at that point is to commit to implementing a new system. Another option too is a direct sourcing. So if you have in certain circumstances a provider that you've already worked with, or you have a scenario where that's possible, you can just say, this is the company I want to work with. This is what I want to use. I can work with them directly. So these vary on your institution and context. Partnership is a super key one. It's something I often speak with my clients about. You really want to build a relationship with a solution provider and a relationship that goes past the point of sale. Because you, as an institutional representative and leader, you're going to have an ongoing relationship with the system and with the people that run it. And so you want to have high confidence in them that they're going to be a good partner to you and a partner in the most authentic and true way in that regard, that they're going to answer your phone calls. They're going to answer your emails. They're going to work to help you when something goes wrong. So you're not just building trust in a technology, you're building trust in the people that run and support that. So that's super important to be careful about.
100%. Yeah.
When we think about expertise, each organization is going to be at a different stage, whether it has in-house expertise, maybe someone who's a developer who's been there for 20 years and they know the system in and out, or maybe it's a department that is really more of a marketing-based team and they don't have that technical depth on the bench, thinking about what their team does. Maybe they need to hire someone outside in either managed services or a consultant to help them get through this. It's important to think about that piece of the puzzle during the procurement process because it is a cost that your budget has to factor in. So don't just think about the software as the cost of the application. It's also the people, processes, and workflows that go around that. So make sure you're thinking about the whole big picture there. And the most important thing I would say in the process is number 7 is momentum. Having a clock, enforcing a timeline and a deadline to maintain focus and ensure success. The reason why you need to have a clock, you could even think about as jokingly as a doomsday clock is this is happening in 6 months. This is happening in a year. If it doesn't happen, you can put like a little exploding clock. It's bad things will happen. And the bad things that will happen is probably either your systems will fail if you're doing a migration or an implementation from your current environment to something new, or you've now wasted a year's or 6 months worth of effort trying to get this for your organization and you're stuck with no result. So it's really important to time box this and time clock these things so that you commit yourself to seeing it through. David?
Would you say, Neil, that that might also be the biggest mistake sometimes, that's just the underestimate of like the time and the momentum
Yeah,
piece of it? Like,
the
yeah.
challenge I see with a lot of organizations is, of course, in many of our institutions, people are wearing multiple hats, probably doing multiple jobs. They're already maybe stretched and pressed for their capacity. But if we don't have this shared purpose, this sense of will of moving forward, and not understanding that this is a serious commitment, it will go by the wayside. And we have to make sure that people understand that we're not going to retreat back into our old habits, that this is a transformational process and we're going to be moving forward together. So it takes a lot of teamwork and goodwill and executive leadership to make that happen. Let's talk about the money. Because that's really
Yeah.
important. How are we going to pay for all this, right? You're saying, oh my
Right.
gosh, Neil, you're talking about this super big transformation with these consultants and with software implementation. How am I possibly going to do this? We have to look at the revenue picture to understand it and think about it critically. And again, this will vary by your organization, how you're structured. So if you are an admission-driven institution where you have ticket sales, make sure that your tickets are not undervaluing the product that you're offering, so that you can cover the cost of operating this operation. So don't make sure that your ticket price doesn't undercut your ability to pay the bill for the software and also for the people to do the work on the ground. Of course, there are other categories of admission that we have to be sensitive and mindful to. Of course, our veterans, persons with disabilities, people from different economic backgrounds. We have those cases that are important as well. But think about your core ticketing operation, something that supports the operation of this system. Donations. So if we're thinking about donations in traditional contexts of institutions, we might be familiar with the named gallery or the named lecture hall or the named building. But also, there's some really important leaders in our technology spaces and communities and businesses that want to support operations. So don't forget about those folks as well. Reach out for them for private support. If there's a technology provider in your community, it could be an insurance company, could be a software company. Maybe they're a target for your development team to reach out to and get private support. And they might be more suited to that level of engagement because they understand the need for systems like this. So you'll be speaking language they understand. Thinking about events, having a dedicated event with your donor base to talk about this and communicate the importance of this mission. Of course, many of us have been to parties or events where we have sort of a brief presentation from the executive director or the board of trustees chair, and they speak. But sometimes it's good to have a nice little party, but you could also do something as informal that speaks directly to those people in a pre-recorded video, a lunch and learn, be a webinar, any way that can communicate to them that talks about the importance of generating that capital needed. Membership. So one of my most important messages about membership is not a discount club. Membership is a place for you to encourage your supporters to support you and make sure that you do that again in a sustainable way economically. So you want to be offering that in a way that supports what you're doing, not undermining your value. Rentals. How many of you have a lecture hall or a classroom or a facility space that is going underutilized because it's not being used on a certain day of the week, or it's not being used by your staff for whatever their needs are? There's a lot of institutions that could create rental businesses. Some people do it for weddings or for conferences or other types of business convenings. If you have capital in terms of event space, don't forget your rental business and make sure that you're doing it to the level that that customer would expect at another venue. Sometimes I hear from clients, oh, well, we can't do that because we're not a hotel or we're not a conference center. And that may be true in terms of what you can offer. Maybe it's a different offering, but your customer probably expects, if there's someone that's going to want to support you and also have their event, think about the complexity and the nuance of that. When we think about retail, sometimes, David, I've worked with institutions. They have two different point of sale systems. They have one for the in-store gift shop and one for the website. And so then
Yes.
those poor
I've had
retail
both. Yeah.
leaders are exporting different spreadsheets and having to build reports because these two point of sale systems don't talk to one another. They never will. There's no way to work with that data effectively. So if you can think about retail as a holistic experience, whether it's an in-person visitor or an e-commerce environment, think critically about that and the efficiencies that you gain from a blended experience there too. And also, if you think as well from a compliance standpoint, too, making sure that your data is secure, that people's data is not being handled differently in different ways. If you're working with auditors, be mindful of that. And then sponsorship. although the corporate landscape is changing and has changed a lot over the years, there are still people that might be interested in supporting you to fund things like this and to sponsor it. Part of it's having the courage to make the ask, having that entrepreneurial mindset to go find those potential corporate sponsors, and then making sure you're working with them in partnership to build a presentation of your brands and an alignment of how you're communicating that message in press releases or public events that supports both of you mutually. David?
And yeah, I would just say that this slide is so important. We hear it all the time, and I think that, one of the areas that I would ask you is like, how would you make like the case, like an ROI case, for infrastructure to your boards and donors? Because I know that that's definitely a question that always comes up, and we have great leadership that talks about this, but I would love to get your thoughts behind that as well.
Sure. I mean, I would
Yeah,
start with my first would be think about all the untapped revenue potential that you're missing by
yeah,
not having any of these things in place and not having them a unified approach for them. So you don't
okay,
even know how
yeah,
much money you could be leaving off the table by not
right,
doing these things. And that should be something that if you're thinking about your fundraising, your operational budget, that should keep you up at
yeah.
night. That's a problem. That should make you uncomfortable. The
Exactly.
other
Yeah.
part is think about all the efficiency that you can gain by using a tool like this.
Yeah.
We think about this in our personal lives, right? So the technology that happens to us in our personal lives often does come into effect in our business environments, in our workplace environments. So if I can get the benefit of ordering my favorite cup of coffee on my favorite mobile app, why wouldn't I want that same convenience of workflow and process in my own work? Right. So taking what we know from our experience in the world and bringing it into the environment of our workplace and the benefits of efficiency and operations and time and how much time we gain to then do other things. So if you have a process, for example, let's talk about a gala event, right? And traditionally that takes you because of your various communication issues. You've got a separate email client that's separate from your event rental planning. All of this, and you've got to constantly run these reports or run different information. If you had a streamlined operation of that, could you do that legwork of development in a much faster timeline and have
Right.
more events a year for fundraising or save money and go back to your board and say, hey, because we have this tool, we actually saved hours and money working faster, lowering our cost. Great. Now this is the hardest part. This is the doing. So it's one thing to talk about the strategy and to talk about approaches, but the other thing is the doing part. And that's my favorite thing. So when I work with my clients at Stimler Advantage, my favorite part of my 5S framework is get started. Let's do it. So first, if you're thinking about beginning your journey with an ERP system or museum operations system, start with an initial audit and market scan. That's something that someone in IT and marketing or your working group you put together can do. And there's very common systems and platforms for that, like Capterra or G2. Think of that as a first point of entry. You're going to get an overview of a system. You're going to read some blog posts. You're just going to familiarize yourself in the environment. Something that we all do in museums is we talk to our peers and colleagues, right? We really trust their opinions and insights and experience. And so talk to people that you trust, talk to people that you know use a system that you're interested in, and have a conversation with them and say, what's your reflection on this? How do you like working with their team? What is the experience like? What is the product like? Now I know that you've been using it for a year now. How has it been? Talk to people that you have confidence in and test the waters with them. Three, survey. Definitely important again to collect that data, right? Data informed decision making. So your internal folks and your customers, you want to identify what problems are we trying to solve here? What are the things that are becoming those points of friction for us internally and externally with our visitors and customers? Making the case. So yes, it's really important to write it down. So you can have the water cooler conversation with your boss, or you can have the, casual post lecture chat with, the president or the director and say, this is really important. We should do this. But what they often need is something actionable. They need a document, a very high level executive summary, a business plan, something that demonstrates a package for them to evaluate with the board and other leaders. So you've got to put it down in writing. The project plan is equally important. How are we going to do this? What budget are we going to apply to this? Who's going to be responsible for doing the work? And what's a realistic delivery timeline? So probably if you're in a larger organization or even a smaller one, probably 1 to 3 months probably isn't realistic. It's probably going to be a 6 month or a year transformation, depending on where you are in your journey. So be real with yourself about that, but write it down in a project plan, knowing it's going to change, knowing there's going to be, things to adjust for. We have holidays, we have people that are out of the office for various reasons. Not everything happens in our perfect little world in our project planner and a Kanban board or a calendar. So understand that flexibility. And then alignment, going back to that top-down leadership and buy-in, make sure this is going to get presented to the leadership of the organization, the board of trustees. If there's a finance committee or a technology committee or an operations committee, that those advisors and supporters are very much invested in this process and that you're communicating with them honestly and effectively about what's needed so that they can help you. Remember that their role is fiduciary. They have a responsibility to protect and serve the institution, and so they care about what you have to say. They are invested in that success and that outcome. So use them as supporters that can help you. You want to also assess your capacity. So we talked a little earlier about, can I do this with the team that I have, whether it's in-house or external? Do I need
Right.
additional help? Do I need an expert? Think about that earlier when you're doing your planning process, so that you can build the budget piece for that, but also say, where do I need help? And it's okay to ask for help. It's hard to do these things by yourself. Also a good solution provider team, they might have a great implementation team or experts that can help you as well. So don't think you'll be all alone on this journey, but make sure you think about others and how they might work with you. And then the most important thing to do is to launch, is to do it, to begin executing on these tasks, right? Put the ship out in the water, send the rocket to the moon. We gotta do it. So, of course, we'll all be nervous until that happens, but once we launch, then we can go and we can grow. So those are the really key things to getting started.
Yeah, this is amazing. And I think like, just like I think that last point is like kind of the hardest part sometimes. I think getting launching it, because I think that there's always this hesitancy of like actually, hey, are we ready to go? And it's like, we're kind of putting our foot in the sand a little bit on that. For that being said, though,
Hmm.
kind of moving it forward to for institutions early in this journey, like
Hmm.
what is the first step that they should take like tomorrow? Like, what do you think?
Well, if you're here today, that's a great sign that you're thinking
Yeah.
about these questions. So I would
Right.
certainly, if I was you, I would take a look back over the slides that David will share, and we'll have some more material coming out from this webinar to share with you as well.
Yep.
Reflect on that material a little bit, and then I would start with your simple auditing. Poke around a little bit, like give yourself an hour or two to do some investigation, and then start thinking about who are the people that are my colleagues and team members and leaders that would support me in doing this work, and start doing the collegial work of building those conversations, having those exploratory conversations and say, let's do this, let's talk about it. So it always starts with our colleagues and our capacity and working in that way. So those are the first steps. And to go back to launch, one of the hard things I think, David, for museums and cultural institutions is that we're often afraid of mistakes. We all want to have the perfect publication, the perfect exhibition, the perfect party, but life isn't perfect. And and our best approach for launching is to do it thoughtfully, of course, with lots of pre-planning and work done in advance to make sure it goes well, but to make sure we actually take the leap and keep going forward. So if you can believe it, we're here. We're at the end of our little high level journey today, and we would hopefully have inspired you to think about museum operations in a dynamic model where we're not planning in 5-year increments, which is pretty much impossible to do if it ever worked in the first place. I highly doubt it. Our world just moves too fast to do that. And to think about your mission and operations as something that are going to be using enterprise resource planning tools, working in partnership with technical solution providers that can help you, and helping you be vibrant, agile, and impactful in the work that you do with your mission to serve the world. And I also just want to end at this point as well with encouragement and support and enthusiasm for all of you doing this work. I know it's hard, and keep brightness in your heart, keep the sun shining in there. You can do it. I'm here to encourage you.
And I wanted to thank everybody. But before we end, Neil, and while I have you here, we do have a question or two, I think.
Great.
So,
I see the
uh,
first one. Should I read it out, David, or are you going to read it
yeah,
out?
if you want to, yeah, that'd be great.
Sure. So the first question that David sent me is, how are museums using legacy systems to manage different things that can streamline their operations and centralize things? So there are different approaches you can do to that. It may be more difficult than having a centralized system, but there are different approaches. So one approach is to try to build an application environment. So another piece of technology that sits on top of those various systems. You might use something like an API, an application programming interface, if those are modern cloud applications, and build data funnels and repositories into a data lake or a knowledge base, which is something a bit more which has also sort of processes and guidelines on top of it. So you can build layers on top of those various applications that can direct those things into custom reporting. So it does often take custom development work in some scenarios. So you might, if you have in-house developers, computer programmers, or you might have to hire other people to build those things for you. But you have to be careful of building those custom environments because they also contain the pathway to technical debt. So do you have the money to sustain that custom build application? Do you have the developers or the technologists to run it all the time? If it breaks, will they fix it? how long are you committing to operate it? So while it might seem like a near term opportunity to build something else on top of those existing applications, don't forget the longer term implications of that decision.
Amazing, amazing. So, well, thank you so much, Neal. I appreciate your time today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We hope you found this session very valuable, as I did. Be on the lookout for our podcast that we generally have. It's called Cultural Animals Museum Leadership Lab, where we speak to museum leaders about real business operations, marketing, and development challenges facing museums today. We generally have a podcast drop at least once a month. We will also be hosting monthly webinars and sharing ongoing thoughts and leaderships at Vivart. Again, as a reminder, we will send out this webinar shortly. And for those who registered, thank you so much for joining us. And again, we look forward to it. And again, thank you so much, Neal, for your time. And look forward to the next. And like Neal said, we have one more question, it looks
Okay.
like.
Happy to
Is that
entertain
all
it.
right? So before we
Absolutely.
end here, you mentioned areas of possible cost savings,
hmm
time, and
hmm
efficiency gains.
Yes.
What areas do you see that are often overlooked for this?
So one example I think would be CRM, so customer relationship management. So that could be related to your email. So one of the worst cases I think of my knowledge of this is where the same person is emailing multiple people throughout the museum trying to resolve a customer inquiry. That could be like buying a ticket, or
Right.
are there tickets left, or are there discounts for
Yeah.
my membership group? So making sure that the single source of truth can really help you with that, because that can be directed to the proper person, but the data funnel where that came from is all captured in the same system. So it's much easier to do that than colleagues who are probably trying to do their best, right, solve that problem, but they don't know the answer. So this is where I think an example of having a system that's enterprise ready, working across the entire organization, can really help you.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and again, if there's any other questions, we'll certainly be able to answer those afterwards. But again, thank you so much, Neal, for your time. And again, we please be on the lookout for our next webinar and also the podcast. Again, appreciate your time, Neal, and have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you,
Take
everyone.
care.
Thanks for
All right.
joining us.
All right. Bye-bye.